listening to the First City Lax podcast, brought to you every week from the Florida Panhandle. Coach John and Coach JP explore the best and worst of lacrosse on the Gulf Coast, so strap your helmets on and let's go.
And welcome back to the podcast. I am your host, Coach John. Coach JP is out sick once again. I know you're all thinking about him and anxiously waiting for him to get back. I'm sure he'll be back on the cast here soon. Once again, I am joined by my good friend and fellow lacrosse coach, Coach Casey Mcdonald. Coach Mac, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Hope you're staying warm, even on the Panhandle. It's cold down here, baby.
It is. Yeah, it's a little chilly here. We had snow 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you saw that, but
we did. We had 9.5 inches just right there.
Yeah. Well, Ed, for those of you watching, you see an unfamiliar face, but we're going to get to know him really quick. And for those of you listening, I would very much like to introduce our very special guest today, Coach Eric Ruppel. Eric, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, you are the head coach at Emory and Henry University, for the head men's lacrosse coach out there in Emory, Virginia, correct?
Correct.
All right. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got there, what your lacrosse background is, how long you've been coaching in general, and just help us get to know you a little bit.
Oh, man. I have been coaching since 2007. I played lacrosse at UNLV in Las Vegas, Nevada. And as a sophomore, a bunch of our coaches were also high school, middle school coaches in the city, and they put us to work. So I started coaching middle school in 2007. Kept with that for a while, went up to the high school ranks, still in Las Vegas at a couple different high schools, Centennial High School and Faith Lutheran. Started and finished at Centennial under that program, middle school through high school. Then moved to Texas for a year, coached at Plano Senior High School, Plano proud, and MCLA at University of Texas, Dallas. From there, I got my first NCAA job, went to Adams State University in Alamosa, Colorado. Then I got my first NCAA head coaching job. I was at Quincy University in Quincy, Illinois for 6 years. And then as of October of this past year, I have been in Emory and Henry at a first year. They had a coach during the recruit year. He ended up leaving. We saw some promise and potential. We took the job. I was able to bring my staff with me. But we are a year one in the South Atlantic Conference with 18 freshmen.
Is your whole team freshmen, or do you have additional?
They are all
wow.
freshmen.
Wow. That's I am a little bit jealous and a little bit shocked at the same time, because, you know, what better position to be in as a head coach than to have an entire roster of players that you can develop over the next 4 years. On the flip side, holy cow, competing with some of the teams. I looked at your schedule. It does not look like you have a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination. I just saw Meadowview on there, right?
Yeah, we had a rough one against Meadowview. In a couple weeks, we have our 3 weeks of death. We go Leonard Ryan, Wingate, and Limestone back to back to back. Very welcome to the sack moment for our young guys. But they're gritty, they're tough. They listen. They're awesome individuals. They're starting to gel as a team. We tell them all the time, if we were there in August to get them a full fall ball, they would be miles ahead of where they were. Unfortunately, we got the job. A hurricane hit. Now we're dealing with some snow, but they will become a very fearsome bunch. We just had a game against Roberts Wesleyan, and every game out of conference, we're just going back into score break and sitting down in the classroom for hours at a time and just teaching them how to do this right. I mean, we don't have enough guys to do full field. So our clear is all on whiteboard and film and just whatever pieces of it we can drill out. but they're really responsive, really receptive, and they're figuring it out. The only thing currently going as a disadvantage to us is the weather, because if you think it's snowing in Florida and Louisiana, welcome to the Appalachian Mountains. But these guys are just fierce. Like they wanted it, freshmen going into one of the best conferences in America. I mean, arguably the best conference this year. And they just keep saying, bring it on. And even after these losses, they're hungry to get into the meeting room, hungry to get film up on our portal. We use Score Break, and they're starting to learn how to watch it, learn how to clip out, learn how to just learn from all of these experiences. So we will definitely finish the season, knock on wood, pending health, a lot better than we started. Wow. And I give them all the kudos in the world, because I think they're insane. I've done this once before. I started the program at Quincy as well. So I'm used to this. So they're freaking out over a couple goals, and I'm like, guys, you have no idea how good you will be.
Yeah.
I was going to steal a question from John.
Do it.
I'm going to steal one. Like you said, you mentioned you did it at Quincy, and I know this, and the fans might not know this, but you and I go back all the way since we met together in Plano. When you were at Plano and UTD, that's when you and I got together and started our coaching relationship and our friendship. You started the Quincy program. Now you're doing it again with 18 freshmen. Do you see that as a really cool career note, to where you're taking 18 hungry kids who have no other choice but next up mentality? Like, do you think of that as one of these things that you'll look back in 15 years and go, that was really cool? We might not have won a lot of games, but that was really cool.
Oh, of course. And to add to that, this going the second time, I learned a lot from the last one. So I kind of learned what to do, what not to do, what to worry about, what not to worry about. Because your first year, our spring seasons are just go, go, go and fly by the seat of your pants anyway. So you start to worry about every little thing. Now I'm a little bit more seasoned, much more I know what matters and what doesn't. And so it's a very interesting opportunity to see what we figured out worked the last time after some trial and error. Now it's not error. We know it to be proven fact. And so we've started to instill a lot of those things. And that's why I think they're catching up so quickly. We're not just, not to say it loosely, but we're not just throwing darts at a dartboard hoping something sticks this time. Right now, today, this is filmed on February 19th. We are last in the country for Division II in clears. Fine. We know our clear works. It's tried and true. At another location, it was a 95% clear rate. We've got freshmen who can't practice it, so we're going to continue to watch film, kind of continue to beat it into the ground. And it's not really beating a dead horse when they still don't quite know where their looks are or how to move the ball very fast. But we're not just going to give up and simplify a clear and go, well, this will save it. No. This is tried and true. This works for half the D2, half the D3, half the D1 teams in America. You have to get to this point. So just understanding those little nuances of the game and keeping a standard that we know that they can attain, even though it's maybe not showing right now in the stats or how we want it to. We know long-term, and I'm saying long-term in April, we know those stats will start to showcase where we want to. I was finally able, and here's my case in point. I was finally able to put in my man down. My man down is very specific. Prior to that, we were running something very basic. I was finally able to put in mine. Over the last 2 games, we've gone 2 for 6. The first 2 games, I think they went 2 for 3 and 5 for 6. And now we're 1 for 3, 1 for 3.
Okay.
So it's showcasing, and it's just understanding that some of these things will be a little bit quicker than others. And some things are going to just take time, and some things are just going to have to take intelligence and desire. But absolutely, to kind of hit it home, I think not so much for me, but these guys will go in a couple years, wow, we did that. We were able to kind of rise from the bottom, and now we're here, so to speak, and just I think they will everyone appreciates it, 15 years down the line. But I think these guys are starting to see it at least in early. And plus, it is something that we're harping on them about. Like, hey, yeah, I mean, we could be, another Division II team in America had some low numbers, and they canceled the rest of their season. They'll try again in a year, hopefully. And our guys were like, well, what would we do that? And I was like, unless you guys are on your deathbed, we are getting that film from Leonard Ryan Wingate and just going for it.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way you're going to, a famous 16-time wrestling champion said, in order to be the man, you have to beat the man. But first you have to see the man. And so, we can forfeit those games. We'd get nothing of it. And so they're very excited to play in those games now because they're like, well, win, lose, or draw, we're going to see what perennial national tournament contenders look like, and we can emulate, and we can see how we factor in and where we will be in a couple years. And I think that's where they really are just headstrong and focused, because we flipped the narrative almost immediately when we got there in October. We're like, hey, this is what we want to focus on. This is what we want you guys to care about. Yes, losing sucks. Winning is great, but the road to get there for some of these teams took forever. Very, very, very few first-year teams make it out of the gate winning 1, 2, or 3 games. My first 2 years at Quincy, we didn't win a game. Now, some of that had to do with the COVID year. The second year was the COVID year, but it took us time. And then by the end, they were more than fine. So I think these guys will be right there as well.
So here's a question. You've done this before. What about your coaching staff? Can you talk about them a little bit? Like how many guys you have there helping you? What's their experience level like in terms of working with a group like this?
Well, I brought my offensive coordinator with me, Coach Johnny Rosas. Coach Johnny Rosas has the claim to fame that he has been coached by me since his very first lacrosse practice. I coached him in middle school, coached him in high school. In fact, even coached him in college. He went to Adams State. A couple years ago, I brought him in.
Did you know my son went there?
Oh, did he? Who?
Yeah. My son, he only spent 1 year there as a freshman. Braden Reich was his name, or it still is his name, actually. But I think you may have been gone by the time he got there. And he is up at Northwest Nazarene now. It's a MCLA team up in Idaho. But they are going D2 next year.
They are going D2.
They are.
Going D2. Yeah, I would have been long gone.
Okay. Gotcha. The point is the reach for that school is widespread.
Yes. So Coach Rosas got to come with me, and he has never done this before. He kind of came in to Quincy with not quite like a finished product, but really, finishing up the finer details. So there are some things where he has to take a step back and go, okay, 18 freshmen. But he's crushing it in those capacities. And I really think it's making him a better coach because we have a saying in our offices every day when we're planning drills and planning practice, step 1. We're on step 1. Sometimes we get to step 2, but we are on step 1. And then fortunate for me, when I got the job, one of my longtime friends and a fellow Division II kind of long stand in Max Kaler, as a goalie coach. He played at Dominican in California, coached at Dominican in California, was with them through their D2 down to MCLA. And then he had moved from the Bay Area and he just found himself in Bristol, Tennessee. I got the job and grabbed him immediately. And he's been a godsend for us. And then we have one other former Lees McRae assistant, Tom Priley, as a face-off coach. Old Salt from Maryland, who I think he'd been at Lees McRae for about 4 or 5 years, but very well known in this area. Actually helped get high school lacrosse started in the Tri-Cities area 15-ish years ago. So this is actually the first time in my NCAA career I have a full staff.
That's awesome. Well,
So
that's best case scenario for coaches, especially with a team like you have. Having a bunch of experienced guys come in and know that, I guess the first thing is knowing you probably don't have to break any really bad habits. Most of the guys. Do you have any brand new players, or is everybody a high school? They've got some high school experience or club experience.
the majority of our guys were pretty high level high school and
Okay,
high level
good.
club guys. We do have some on the lower end, which is very humbling. And it keeps a lot of our guys in check because it does keep us on step one. But it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And they're learning it. And nobody didn't play before. We have some weird anomalies. We have this attackman from Roanoke, Virginia, who played all the way up until maybe high school and then thought maybe baseball was his sport. Ended up getting recruited to Emory and Henry for baseball. Found out baseball wasn't his sport and came back to lacrosse. And he's doing great for us.
I love baseball players in lacrosse.
But
they know
but
how to stay down on a ground ball.
Yeah, but that's where we're at. The majority of our guys played at some pretty decent clubs in high schools, specifically like our Virginia guys, our Baltimore guys. We've got a kid from Indiana who's on True National. So we've got the high school pedigrees, but it doesn't matter. That does not prepare you for the freshmen going in against these 22, 23, 24-year-olds. So that's great that you played there.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, quick, before we get too far into it, I usually ask the guests a couple of rapid fires, so I'm going to do that right now, and then that's right. And then we are just gonna get after it. We're going to talk NCAA. We're going to talk about recruiting. We're going to do all that. But before we do any of that, a couple of rapid fires. The number one question I ask is, what book are you reading right now, and or what is your favorite book, podcast, show, or YouTube channel that you're following that all of our listeners and viewers should know about?
I am going to do book reading right now because our leadership group and the coaches are reading It Takes What It Takes for very obvious reasons. And I think that's a really good – I used to be a big first year with a freshman, like an energy bus or a hard hat guy. But when we were down in Florida – we were in one of the coaching seminars, and it was all on sports psychology, and they led us on to a couple of these books. And so we started with It Takes What It Takes, and that is right on the money of kind of our mindset of, to put it bluntly, neutral thinking this year. It doesn't matter how many times we messed up, we have to continue going forward. And that is the overarching theme of the book, is just to continue pushing forward, knowing that you can. And so we're on that. We will be on that as a complete team, probably by spring break. We've got some it comes with little worksheets and stuff, and we're going to do all that. After that, I'm going to say my favorite, and it is along these same lines. I am a huge, huge New Zealand All Blacks fan. I grew up in Vegas with the Rugby Sevens every year. So their next book, and my favorite of all time, will be Legacy. And it's just sitting there on my bookshelf. And the boys
can't wait.
They're like, we're going to get there.
I can't ever pass up an All Blacks video on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Anything comes up, I'm watching whatever it is, All Blacks. And if it's a haka, it's a stop down. I will get comfortable and I will watch it, and then I'll jump off the couch.
Well, they have it's on. I think it's on Amazon Prime, like Prime Video or something like that. They have an All Blacks documentary, which I just watched the other day, and that was really good. That was just like getting to know those guys, seeing their personal lives, and they deal with all the same stuff that we do. And they deal with getting older. They deal with injury. They deal with family issues. They have all those same things, and yet they're these elite level. International athletes that are recognized anywhere they go, at least in the rugby community.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, one more, and then we'll get after it here. What a player or coach or role model have you tried to model your style after, if any of them? You got a favorite besides Coach Mack? Yeah, that's an obvious one.
I have a hodgepodge, and this is the cop-out answer. Absolutely, I know that already. But my first and foremost influential coach was my high school everything coach. The only thing he didn't coach me in was swimming. Fun fact, I happened to once upon a time be a very good swimmer. But Coach Salas at Mojave High School, shout out. He'll probably watch this actually. But he was extremely influential in my development years as high school. I was a pretty standard freshman team to JV team to varsity in everything I did. And it just so happened that our wrestling team happened to be phenomenal throughout the country those couple years. And he was our wrestling coach, and just he told it like it was. He loved you unconditionally. He was one of the first guys that when you did something awesome, he let you know. When you did something bad, he let you know. And that kind of correlated, and I saw a lot of similarities to my second college lacrosse coach, whom is the godfather of lacrosse in Las Vegas, Nevada, Gary Campo. He was same guy. You know, he's to the outside perspective, he was probably a lot back then. He's calmed down now, but to inside the circle, he's the greatest man known to life. And then I had a couple mentors when I was in Texas that really just taught me the things that I didn't even know I needed to know. One in Jason Gilday and the other in Carl Lynch. Casey was there too, but those two, you have to understand, I moved to Texas, and why I moved to Texas was I was a teacher in Vegas. They were consolidating all of the teaching positions, and we just had to, I knew that I was not going to be continuing to teach at the middle school that I was teaching at. So I said, I'm moving. I moved to Texas with just whatever I could fit in my car. And I was fortunate enough throughout the first couple weeks to get a hold of some lacrosse people, one of which was Jason Gilday, who owned Chaos Lacrosse. I lived in Little Elm. They practiced in Frisco. They brought me on almost immediately. And those two have just been, and I mean, to this day, they're super influential. There's very few people that I talk to every single day. Casey is usually one of them. Those two are others. I talk to them every single day.
That's awesome. You know, one thing I always say when someone says like they have a coach who is, you know, the guy to be the first one to tell them if they did something good and also the first one to tell them if they did something bad, I always say, you're so lucky. Because some coaches, they will only blow smoke up your ass. They will only say the positive things, and then they will never hold you accountable. And that can be problematic in some cases. And there are those other coaches that no matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you try, it's never going to be good enough. And that's also problematic. Having a healthy balance of that, someone who holds you accountable, but rewards you and recognizes you when you are checking those boxes and doing all the right things, or even if you're doing just one right thing, you happen to get it right once. Having a coach like that is just a huge blessing. And so I say you're so lucky.
You've got to be the coach that you model yourself after your favorite coaches, but you at the same breath have to be the coach that you needed. And you know now as an older individual, that's the coach you needed at that age, because now you're coaching that age and you need that age to be better than you were. So you have to do it 2 times over. And I have to remind myself of that all the time. And actually, my wife reminds me of it all the time, because I'll come home right now with our first year program at high school level, and I'll be frustrated because we just had a horrible day of insert the terrible drill, and we went through it. And I'll come home mad at the world, and she's just, gotta remember who you are. Who do you need for them? Who do they need you to be right now? And it's you have to be that in this day and age, especially now. And with some of the stuff we'll talk about, these kids are going through a world that the 3 of us did not grow up in. Right. It's a completely different mentality, and I love how Eric is doing the psychology aspect, the sports psychology, in addition to the lacrosse and the lacrosse IQ. And then in addition to what we haven't even covered on his side is his weightlifting and strength and conditioning, which is the other angle of his side and where he's focused his education. So when you get into that angle of it, I mean, you're talking about a full circle coaching staff and having a complete coaching staff for the first time, which I've known for years. He's always wanted and struggled with and tried to get me to move to Illinois or get me to move to Alamosa or wherever we were, right? Or stay in Dallas and go help him with the Comets of all teams. Yeah. Like now to know that he has an entire staff, all this time and knowing that he's putting in that vision, I know that he is both of those coaches at every single time for these kids. It's amazing.
Well, that actually leads me into one of my questions, and let's kick it off right there. I mean, what kind of things are you doing to prepare for this season? I mean, you've been doing this for 4 months. 4 months is not nearly enough time to get these kids in shape.
Not even close. Not even close. We came in October, and we said, we got to evaluate your sticks first. Now, fortunately, this is one of the first schools I've ever been at where I don't necessarily need to be in the weight room for multiple years. All 5 at Quincy and even at Adams State. I was involved with the strength and conditioning for our teams. Here, we have a full strength staff. We have Coach Flores for the men's lacrosse team is phenomenal. I signed off on her minute 1. I looked at our team builder. I read her plans. I read her thought process, and I watched I watched all the lifts, but I watched 1 or 2 lifts critically, and I said, "You're going to be more than fine for us." So that took a little bit off my plate, and I could focus on some other things that I do with the National Strength and Conditioning Association for lacrosse. But first and foremost, we evaluated their sticks, and we said, "Guys, there's only 18 of you. You're going to get your conditioning in eventually." This week was that week. We're a little behind where we wanted to be due to snow and due to some other things. But this was the first time we could actually focus on their conditioning, and specifically with us. And I think it's a pretty commonality at most higher NCAA schools at this point is speed training. Speed training is absolutely 100% more important than the actual conditioning aspect. I'm a big fan of Tony Holler. I've gotten to meet him a couple times, talk to him a couple times. I am a firm believer in his 80% trained, 100% healthy. So now at a place like Emory and Henry, where we do have some of the bells and whistles that most Division II schools aren't used to, we have laser timing gates that we can time their mile per hour. We can do their flying 10s. We can do their 40s. We can put them through entire speed training regimens. This is the first school I've been at in 6 years that has a track. So we don't even have to get them on the turf. We get them on the track, and we could focus on some of those things. We have some data, and there's not a lot in the country, but we've got some data on how much a midfielder sprints, how much an attacker sprints, how much a defenseman sprints, how much they're moving throughout the game, all that GPS data. I have to borrow it because we don't have GPSs yet, but I know where to find it. And so now that we've done 4 games, now that the boys have seen, okay, this is what college lacrosse actually is. This is where we are failing. Now we have a little break. We have the next 13 days before a game, and then we go into conference play against Anderson, so wish me luck. But now for these next 13 days, we can start to implement what we wanted to do in August. Mm-hmm. And so now, yesterday they finally had actual conditioning. And we sprinkle it in. It's voluminous. It's 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's not all at once. It's not continuous. I don't need to work those systems. I just need them to start getting a little bit more motivated. We'll use motivated as the word. And then over the next couple days, it's going to get nicer. We're going to be able to run a little bit more. And then we do a couple other things outside of the weight room that's working on, shoulder mobility, hip mobility, things that are going to keep them springy. That's my rule. Be springy. You don't have to be the strongest guy, but you do have to be the springiest guy in lacrosse. And you're seeing that throughout all of strength and conditioning right now. I mean, the NFL has moved far, far away from the 400-pound lineman at this point for a reason.
Yeah.
So we're getting there, and we're instilling those things. And we've got a little bit of the sports science toys to be able to do it. You know, we've got a velocity-based trainer in the weight room, so we can see their VBT movements, pushing the bar. Or in my case, I always do it at 135. No matter the lift, 135. I want to see what you can push velocity-based training at 135. And I know some metrics, 0.75. You're pushing 0.75. We're happy. That means you'll be able to push around a 200-pound midfielder at least once. So we focus on those things. I'm not going to say there's a tried and true recipe for success anywhere. I've seen teams that have it down to the nth degree of volume and load management and struggle. I've seen teams that run into the ground and do well. But I think we will eventually, now that our sticks are fine, now that we're getting to understand the lacrosse IQ, now that we're understanding the speed of the game, I think we'll get to a point where we'll have a very good mix of load management, speed training, stuff like that.
That's cool. That, having those tools at your disposal is, I think, it's an amazing advantage. I think maybe just to know your own players, and for high school coaches like myself and Casey right now, we don't have those tools. We're not going to get those tools, especially being at public schools. Like, the money is just not there. So what would you say to someone who's potentially they want to play at that higher level? They don't have those tools. You know how valuable they can be. What are the other things that they can do?
Oh, what a good question. Well,
I know the answer. I know one of the answers that he's told me in that same, you outlined my situation. Our situation is, you don't have to have the bells and whistles, but you can pretend like you do. You can do body weight.
I did tell you that.
You don't have to do 135. You don't have to do 75. 75 pounds. You can do body weight. Start with body weight and grow from there. Prove the concept. And look, Eric, you did. You made me sit back and I was like, you built it all, and you were like, go body weight. There's no reason. If your kids have never experienced it and you don't have the access, don't worry about not having that. Work with what you can, stopwatches and body weight, and go from there. Prove the concept, build your program, get your fundraising up, and go from there. Because hopefully for the audience listening, it's really cool if you're at XYZ private school with unlimited booster funding, and it's like, oh, well, Coach Ruppel says I need this thing and the GPS thing and the metrics thing. I need that book and I need that book. Write the PO. And then you've got, guys like us at XYZ public high school in Lacrosse, Siberia, who are like, we have a grass field that's mowed ish. So what do I do? That's all we got. We got a field that's occasionally mowed. So you got to kind of have that mentality of, okay, where do we fit in? Where can we actually do it? You don't have to match the upper echelon guys. You can fake it till you make it. And it's the truest thing that got me through June to September last year when I told Eric I was doing this. And A, he told me I was a little nuts, but B, he told me, I know you're doing it for your son, so here's what we're going to do. And that's what we did.
You started from zero at that school. Zero.
Started,
you had nothing.
Yeah. I had permission, and I had 4 players with lacrosse experience. Yeah.
And you had to go get permission as a thing too.
I had to go get it.
Yes, you started with 0. So yeah, you are definitely a success story. We're going to keep watching for sure. Well, that's great advice. I love the fact what I'm picking up from that from both you guys is that the key isn't necessarily the tools or those resources. The key is more or less consistency. Whatever it is you're going to use, whether it's body weight or whether it's VBT or GPS or whatever it is, the key is consistency. You can take a measurement one time, but if you don't have a metric, you don't have a standard, and if you don't have any way to compare it to another metric, it's really ineffective. It doesn't really do you too much.
Yeah, whatever you pick to test doesn't matter, the higher end or the lower end. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have a little bit of sports science background, but we were ecstatic at the last place to get jump mats, right?
Oh,
I know how to use force plates, but we were happy with jump mats. Here, we've got a little bit more, and we can start to do those things. And like our guys next week will start to be weekly timed. We only did it once in the fall just to get a baseline data test. Now, moving forward in March and April, we're going to test them every Monday after a game for a couple reasons, fatigue, but just to see if they're taking some of our speed training, our conditioning serious, and see if their numbers go up.
mm-hmm.
But even if we didn't have those laser timers, we have a stopwatch. It may not be the most reliable thing in the world, but it's going to be close enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got one thing that I know the answer to, but I know the audience doesn't. So I'm going to sandbag the question and let Eric run with it. With the metrics and the laser timers and everything you've got coaches like me, you've got coaches like you, you've got coaches like Jason, you got Carl, who have every other opinion on how to time the metrics. Do you do it with sticks in hands? Always, every run is a lacrosse related run, or do you do it track style, Olympic style, lacrosse style? How do you take your measurements and how do you apply it to the game?
Okay, so what we do when we are testing for results, I just need your body. I want you to be stretched. I want you to be springy. I want you to be in just shirts and shorts, because I want maximal data. Right? Pads, sticks. I mean, at the NFL Combine, you are not fully padded. There's a reason.
Right.
We want maximums. We want those kids to see what their maximum possible velocity is. When we do everything else, right now, we do all of our conditioning with a ball in the stick.
Yep.
Because we want to worry about, well, that's great that you can run really fast and run really far, but that ball fell up on the ground about 30 yards ago.
Right.
So when we're conditioning, speed training is a little different, because speed training, we're focusing on a completely different variable, right? We're trying to get our knees up. We're trying to get everything correct, trying to get these guys running forms down to the more scientific style, because lacrosse is a wild sport. Lacrosse, you get the kid from Louisiana who just started playing his freshman year of high school. You also get the kid from Texas who's been in a weight room since they were in 5th grade with football and know how to do everything correctly. You get the kid from Northern Virginia who had to run track and play lacrosse at the same time to get their foot mechanics and leg mechanics down. So we get a lot of hodgepodge. I think a lot of sports are like that. Football and soccer, not so much, because there is a lot of technique at the younger ages with those, and we just don't quite have that with lacrosse yet. But we get the whole hodgepodge. So when we're focusing on one very specific task, we're not going to focus on the other. So like, I'm big with ladders, but not for agility. I'm all for ladders for muscle memory, creating the neural synapses in their brains so they don't trip over themselves. Once they can do that pretty consistently, I add a stick. And, if we're doing, depending on the footwork, maybe we're switching hands, maybe defense is keeping their stick out, but we will only add the next variable once they can do the previous variable. So like, now we're running with a ball in our stick, and we're college guys, but we're running with a ball in our stick. But we weren't prior, because we had to get some things correct. And then on maximal testing days, it is just you and your fortitude.
Absolutely.
Do you practice every day right now? Do you lift every day? What's your schedule?
God, I wish we could practice every day right now.
Oh,
It just
man.
snowed 4
So
inches.
that's the next angle, right? The hours. You talk about the hours and the difference between a middle school coach, a high school coach, and a division coach.
If we know it's time and consistency, let's hear what it is.
Yeah, in the spring, we go two weightlifting days a week with an optional third mobility focused day. So our Fridays in the weight room are a lot lighter, a lot more mobility focused, because we probably have a game on Saturday. But Monday and Wednesdays we're in the weight room. Typically, most college teams do about 2 days a week in the spring. In the fall, it kind of depends on, one, the scheduling of the school. Division II, we do not get to control their schedules.
Right.
We typically go 3, and then we'll have some on field. So for us in the weight room is not conditioning. Weight room is make sure that you are not going to get injured, right? It is injury prevention first, gaining muscle mass second.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in there 3 days a week. Our conditioning will be off of those days. We're not going to lift. And this is where I'm going to contradict myself because Tony Holler says you can squat and sprint. But we're also hitting each other. So we're not going to squat and sprint on the same day, usually. But we're going to split those up. We're going to have weightlifting 3 days a week. We're going to have kind of a condition-focused practice 1 to 2 days a week, depending on the time of year. But we're NCAA D2. We have the same averages as D1. We are definitely on the field 6 days a week if we can help it, which right now about 3/4 of the country can't. But but in a normal perfect year, we're basically Monday through Friday, game on Saturday, give or take. But we're trying to go all 6 days a week. Now I do load management things. So and anyone who does load management, it's just green, yellow, red. Like we have green days, we have yellow, red. We have red days. You can't have 2 red days in a row. That's when your RPE is above 7. But we segment it in ways where we can get the most out of them in the times we have. The one thing that I've started to do based on a lot of research and just my own sanity is we call it the athletic work day. So we don't do anything until they're done with school. They're usually done with classes around 3:30, and then we will try to block out that 4 hours or 3 hours, depending on the day, after class. So we're not morning weights or morning conditioning, then run to class, then practice. That's a long day for the kids. That's a long day for the coaching staff. When I was doing that prior, we'd be on campus at 5 a.m. We wouldn't get off campus till 7 or 8 p.m. And that's draining for us, draining for the guys. They don't feel like they ever have any free time. They don't ever feel like they're catching up on sleep.
Right.
So we go into that athletic work day. We go weights. So like a typical Monday for us, weights, meeting, practice. Typical Tuesday, meeting, practice. Typical Wednesday, weights, running, practice, and so on and so forth.
And how long are your practices typically? And what's the structure like? Do you include I talked to one coach a while back and they said every practice they start with 30 minutes of film. They do 30 minutes of video review first, and then they go out and they hit the field. And their practice is only on the field is only an hour and a half. So it's 2 hours total, 30 minutes of film, 90 minutes of on-field work. And usually the first hour of that on-field work is position specific. So if you're willing to share, you don't have to, of course.
Yeah.
You're like, what's your practice schedule like structured like?
Oh, I kind of just told you because we go weights, meeting, practice.
Right. Yeah.
So there, we do a film component. We can't get them in the film room 5 days a week. We just don't have those luxuries or that building space here. But we get them in 2 days a week for sure.
Okay.
So 2 days before practice, we do what we like. We start off Monday with a team meeting where we're going over general concepts and some stuff from maybe the week before. And then that Tuesday we do positional film where I have the defense, Johnny has the offense, and we're going over those concepts and what we're trying to focus on for the week. But we're knocking out practice meeting purposed film 2 days a week, and then we'll have another one for scout and a couple other things. But we're also only about an hour and a half in a perfect world. Some days we go a little bit longer, but our longer days are slower days. Our longer days are 100% learn days. We are learning. I am spending 15 minutes talking about fast breaks. I'm spending 15 minutes talking about concepts. Johnny's spending 15 minutes, 30 minutes with the offense talking about concepts. So our total volume workload is still always going to be about an hour 20 to an hour and 40 minutes. That 90-minute mark is pretty much the gold standard from attention span, CNS system. Like everybody kind of gets bored after an hour and a half. And I don't say that negatively. That's just the human condition. You know, you can get an extra 30 minutes out of them if we're finishing with, you know, like we used to do a thing, full field Fridays. Oh, we could get the extra 30 minutes out full field Fridays, winner gets something. But in a typical day, we wanted it that hour 30 so they're retaining as much as possible and their minds aren't wandering and they're not just broken by the end. We typically start with stick skills as an entire group right now. So we're doing maybe our first conditioning, then we go into stick skills as an entire group. Right now, because we've got some things now in place, we're probably only going positionals for about 10 to 15 minutes at most. A lot of that, like offense, will be skeletoning or focusing on one very specific concept. Defense, same thing, and it could be different every day. It could be the same every day. You know, right now, my defensive group for these next 12 now days, that 15 minutes of positional, a lot of ground balls. Every variation of it we can get. But the offense, not so much. The offense has to learn a couple different scheme things that we're a little weak on. It all kind of depends on the day, and then we'll come together with our overarching principles of the day. We try to theme most days if we can, so they have the right mindset for it, so they're not so overwhelmed. And this is a commonality if you talk to a lot of college coaches these days. You know, we don't end every single day on sixes. We don't end every single day like man up, man down, or full field. We focus on a couple concepts, and we get to the point where we're comfortable with it, and we're happy. But then again, we devote entire practices to one side of the ball. We might do an entire sixes practice and throw in a couple constraints or variations based on what we're seeing that, you know, teams playing us. But we don't keep it the same every day. We have our staple drills, and everyone does. Those are your program defining drills that you better figure this one out real quick because one time in an indoor arena in Plano, Texas, two coaches just thought of something, but it's been there ever since. But most of it for us is very, let's focus on the concept. Let's make it perfect. And then before we make it perfect, we can't move on. And sometimes it'll take 2 days. A big thing with a young team is same practices back to back. We typically, our Monday and our Tuesday practice look almost exactly the same most weeks, unless the snow dictates otherwise. And we try to do that because let's just say our slow break drill wasn't looking very good on Monday. Well, we're not going to give up on it. We're going to try it on Tuesday, and we're going to let them have slept on it, and then it's much prettier. But yeah, I think that hour and a half is crucial, especially because 4 hours is not a lot. Like, it seems like a lot, but it's not a lot.
It's not.
After meetings, after weights, after who knows what else, maybe the kid had to go to study hall. I think that hour and a half is a really good, happy middle for a lot of teams. And that's all my D1 friends are pretty much on that hour and a half plus meeting.
Let me ask you a question. Sorry, Casey, I'll let you.
No, huge. That was huge. That was just massive. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, it's, well, the thing is, and the thing that I was thinking of while you were talking there is that, you know, a lot of the people that listen to this, that are watching this, they're either players or parents of players. We got a handful of coaches too, which this is going to be really valuable information for them also. But the parents are the ones that, you know, they're sort of driving the boat. And sometimes it's the player who wants to play for, you know, going from high school to college. But, you know, knowing what the schedule is like and knowing kind of what to expect, I think is huge. What would you say to a parent of a player or a player on how to prepare for a program like yours? Was that too much, Casey?
No.
I was waiting for this question because he nailed it. People are watching, and before he answers, I would say to our audience and to the growing First City audience, by the way, you see the metrics are going up there.
I appreciate it, man. We're trying.
This was a lot of information. This was like drinking from a fire hose, right? Eric is analytical. He's psychological. He's physical. He's all the above. And our audience just got a huge amount of information. I would say for them right now, pause this podcast, absorb it, rewind, and listen to it again and take it back in, because Eric talked about it. You get 4 hours with them, and really you get 20-minute chunk here, 15-minute chunk here, 90-minute chunk, and that's it. Like that's what you're getting. But now in terms of how to prepare for that, that's all Eric's question. I can't even tell you. That's Eric's
well, so that's actually part one. It's only part one, because part two is going to be the one that you and I just talked about, Casey, just a couple of weeks ago. We're we're already at like the 49-minute mark here. And so right now, all the families are like, let's go, coach. Like, give me the good stuff. And we're just like, we've been giving you the good stuff the whole time.
They're getting their money's worth with this episode.
That's right. Sure. That's right. So, okay, Eric, part one is, what would you tell a parent or player on, how to prepare for this? So this is a first in the short history of First City Lacrosse, but we are having to cut this interview short just for right now. This is part one. Part two is going to drop next week, where we get into more of the higher level college stuff, practice plans, what players can expect, and staffing issues that coaches kind of have to deal with. You're not going to want to miss it, but that's it for today. I appreciate you listening. As always, drop us a like, subscribe, follow, or comment wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also find us on social media at First City Lax. That's 1STCITYLAX. And then you can email us directly as well if you've got an idea for a show or content you want to see or interviews you want us to track down. JON@firstcitylax.com is the email. I look forward to hearing from you. As always, get your reps in, be a good human. We will see you next time.
If you like what you hear, drop us a like and follow wherever you downloaded this podcast from, and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at First City Lax. Check back every week for more content. Thank you for being a part of the First City Lacrosse podcast.